Oh, what a story I have for you today, everyone. I am so excited to tell you this story, but I warn you, something might sound a little bit odd about how I read my story, so pay attention, see if you can pick it up. So once upon a time, Pete the cat ruled over Cat City. Pete loved to go through the streets and look at Pete's castle. One day, Pete met Pete's sister, Plum, in a small garden. Plum was wearing Plum's best dress. When Plum saw Pete, Plum smiled wide, showing Plum's shiny teeth. Pete smiled too and wrapped Pete's tail around Plum's in greeting. ... So what did you think, grade 4s? My story is not done yet, but it has a great beginning. I don't know about you though, but something sounded a little bit odd. You see, I worked really hard not to use any pronouns in all of this writing. There is no pronouns whatsoever. And do you know what that does to your writing? It makes it sound really weird and almost a little bit boring because I keep repeating the word Pete, 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 Plum, 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 Plum. There's no way that can make an interesting story. So every once in a while, we need to switch up our words and use pronouns to replace our nouns and make our story a little bit more interesting. So the rule I like to use is you use one name and two pronouns. So every time you use one name, the next two words in that sentence should be pronouns, shouldn't be the person's name again. And then after you've used a pronoun 2 or maybe even 3 times, then you can go back to using their actual name. But if that is my general rule, one name, two pronouns. So let's go through and let's see if we can change our story to be a little bit more accurate. We're gonna have to think about which pronoun best replaces each word. Once upon a time, Pete the cat ruled over Cat City. I like that sentence. Let's leave it alone. Pete, oh, look, I'm using Pete again right away. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cross out Pete and I'm going to replace it with a pronoun. It's at the beginning of a sentence, so it has to be a subjective pronoun. And because Pete seems to be a boy, we are going to change that to he. He loved to go through the streets and look at Pete's castle. Oh, there's another Pete. I don't want to use Pete. I want to use a pronoun. Now, in this case, it's talking about a castle belonging to Pete. So it's a possessive pronoun. So instead of writing he, I'm going to write his, because his means it belongs to him. So there we go. Let's just read that sentence and make sure it makes sense. He loved to go through the streets and look at his castle. Yep, looking good. Okay, one day, Pete, I have two pronouns written down already, so I can keep that Pete. So let's keep going. One day, Pete met Pete's sister. There's another Pete right away. Let's cross that one out. It's talking about the sister belonging to Pete. So we want to use our possessive pronoun again. We want to use his. Pete met his sister, Plum, in a small garden. Question, should I get rid of the name Plum? Because technically I only have one pronoun. The answer is actually no, because Plum is a new person. If we get rid of the name here, we'll never know what the name of the second person is. So please leave Plum. Don't change it if it's a different name. So let's read that again. One day, Pete met his sister Plum in a small garden. Very good so far. Plum was wearing Plum's best dress. There's two Plums in a row, and we already have a Plum here, so let's get rid of both of them. I'm going to replace Plum with she, because we're talking about his sister. So a sister is a she. She was wearing the best dress belonging to Plum. We're going to use our possessive pronoun, her best dress. When Plum saw Pete, once again that's good because we have two of our pronouns there. So when Plum saw Pete, Plum, ooh, there's another Plum right away. Let's change that one to a she. She smiled wide, showing plums. Oh, there's another plum right away. Let's change that one to a her. When Plum saw Pete, she smiled wide, showing her shiny teeth. Pete, we do have a Pete up there, so we can probably change that one too. Pete is a he. Smiled too, and wrapped, there's another one, so let's change that one too. A tail belonging to Pete, his tail, around plums in greeting. Now this one, we could keep it as plums, but for the sake of making all of these, or as many as we can pronouns, I'm gonna change this one to hers. Hers, not just her, because we can't say wrapped around her tail. It doesn't have the word tail in there, so we have to use the word hers there. That's a tricky one. Good job if you catch that. So now with all of these changes, our story is going to make a little bit more sense. Let me read it again, and I want you to see if you can tell if it sounds better, or maybe we made it worse. Who knows? We could always make these things worse, I suppose. So let's go back through our story. I'm going to give us our lovely pictures, and let's see how we do. So once upon a time, Pete the cat ruled over Cat City. He loved to go through the streets and look at his castle. One day, Pete met his sister, Plum, in a small garden. She was wearing her best dress. When Plum saw Pete, she smiled wide, showing her shiny teeth. He smiled too, and wrapped his tail around hers in greeting. I don't know about you, grade 4s, but that sounds a lot better to me. If you would like something extra to do today, I would love to see if you could make the rest of this story. What happens to Pete and Plum after this point? Do they go on an adventure together? Do they discover that there's an evil person trying to overthrow the king? Do they find a new friend or a new pet somewhere else in the city? Is there a rat infestation? I want to know what's going on with Pete and Plum. That is your challenge for today if you have some extra time. Write it down in your homeschool journal if you so desire. Oh, I'm so excited to see what stories you can come up with. Okay, that's all for me. Goodbye, everyone.